Adventist mission. Am I right?
Correct.
Yes, yes. Welcome. And Dr. Kraus actually has a very diverse experience. As far as I know, you have you have an interesting education in different areas. So your bachelor in what area, Dr. Kraus? In education?
Yeah, I guess the first one was a Bachelor of Arts in looking at English and history, and then I did a Bachelor of Education at Avondale University, which was in education.
Mm-hmm. And your master's degree is in journalism, am I right?
That's right. That's right.
Yes, and your PhD in practical theology. So what was the emphasis of your PhD degree?
Yes, I did my thesis or dissertation on urban centers of influence, Ellen White's concept of urban centers of influence and how it can be applied in a 21st century context.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have really an expert in the question of urban mission in urban centers. So we have, this is our first expert, Dr. Gary Kraus, and our second expert, and we are waiting for him to join us, is Dr. Jim Park. Dr. Jim Park is also an expert in mission. He has a PhD from the AUA Seminary, and he used to be a professor of mission at Adventist International Institute of Advanced Studies. Now he is Professor Emeritus, and he is an adjunct professor at many schools, universities, including Adventist University of Africa. So I believe there are some technical problems, but he is with us, and in a while, in a very short, I hope he will be able to join us. So far, let us start our discussion. And Dr. Kraus, I would like to first question, and this question is related to your PhD dissertation. I remember that when I became an Adventist, there was a very popular idea among Adventists that we need to go to the rural area, not to the urban centers, but to the rural area, because persecution and everything most probably will happen in big cities, and in villages, in rural territory, it will be much easier to survive the period of persecution. But recently, we have a different emphasis that it is not yet a time to go to the villages, because we still have a mission for the cities. How would you comment this change or this trend that we have right now?
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Felix, for your introduction and welcome, and greetings to everybody who's participating today in this conference. And that's a very good question to start with, because when we look at the growth of the Seventh-day Adventist Church through the years, it has been almost totally in rural areas. And frankly, we are a country living, loving people. And we like to be in rural areas, and there's many good reasons for that. I love to be in the countryside too. And we started as a small rural movement in Northeast United States. And one of the reasons that we've worked so well in rural areas is because, frankly, let's be candid, it's a lot easier. It's cheaper, people are more available, and we like to live there. So I think perhaps the most influential publication that has influenced the way that we think about mission to the cities or in rural areas was a little pamphlet that was published by the church back in the 1950s, and it was after Ellen White's death, and it was a compilation of the different things that she has said and written about living in the country. Now, the problem is with compilations that often they tell us more about the editor, the people doing the compiling, than it does about the actual writer. And so you will notice that it's almost like the editor went through and found every negative thing he could find about the cities and every positive thing he could think about rural areas, and then put them into this one little publication called Country Living. And this was distributed in the thousands. And actually in my studies, I discovered that it was quite possible that there in the late 1950s, it's possible that every Seventh-day Adventist church, every Seventh-day Adventist family in North America could have had a copy of this publication. And it's interesting that in recent years, the Ellen White estate has put out a new compilation, and you'll notice it's titled very differently. The first one was called Country Living. This one is called Ministry to the Cities. So you can see the different focus. And I believe that this second compilation brings a very important balance, because Ellen White certainly did talk about the benefits of country living. But on the other hand, she was, I'm going to use the word obsessed, particularly in the latter years of her life. She was obsessed with the importance of urban mission. And in 1901, you'll see that Stephen Haskell and his wife Hetty, Stephen Haskell, a very senior Adventist statesman, Adventist pioneer, he went as a missionary. It wasn't to Asia, it wasn't to Africa, it wasn't to Europe. It was to New York City, and he went right into the heart of Manhattan. And I actually visited the apartment block where they lived more than 100 years ago. And that was right in the middle of the city. So whatever you may think about what Ellen White said about country living, she was also compelled to talk about the importance of ministry to the cities. And she went to her death, I believe, disappointed in the church, because time and time again, she counseled, she wrote, she spoke about mission to the cities. There was a period of time where she wouldn't even talk to the president of the General Conference because she felt he wasn't doing enough about city ministry. So friends, I think it's about time for us to have a new mission refocus where we don't neglect the rural areas, of course not, but we need to realize now that the majority of the world's population is living in cities. So that is our new mission field. Sorry, Dr. Felix, that was a long answer to a short question, but I get a bit excited on this topic.
Yes, thank you very much. By the way, I would like to encourage all the participants to ask questions to Dr. Gary Kraus and to Dr. Jim Park, who are joining us very soon. And actually, there was a question how it's possible to watch the presentation that were missed by somebody. So all the presentations are available online, and you can watch them at any time. And also, I would like to announce that we are going to upload all the presentations on the YouTube channel so that they will be always available for the public. Now, I would like to ask another question, and is connected to what you just said right now. You said that it is much easier to preach gospel or three angels message in the rural area. Can you tell us what are the particular challenges of preaching the gospel, our message, in the big cities? What challenges do evangelists and missionaries face when they go with the mission to the big cities?
Yes, it's a long list when you think it through, because number one, it's much more expensive to work in the cities. If you want to locate in the cities, if you want to run public meetings in the cities, if you want to send global mission pioneers to work in the cities, it's a lot more expensive. Secondly, there are many more distractions in the city. There are museums and concert halls and different events going on, and there are plenty of things to take people's attention away from spiritual things. It's also sometimes very hard to even get access into homes. In many cities, there are apartment buildings where to even get access into the building, you have to know somebody already. So you can't just go knocking on doors. You can't distribute literature, so you don't get there. Now, there's also people in cities tend to be busier. They have longer commutes. They tend to work longer hours. They are caught up in many different things, and to actually get time to talk to people is a real struggle. The other thing too is, and I don't want to be condescending to rural areas, but it's just a fact that people in urban areas tend to be more educated. And so you're going to get harder questions from people living in cities. Also, in cities, people have seen it all. There's nothing new under the sun. Why should they give attention to you when there are 1,000 other things that can catch their attention? I can remember the first time I ever went to New York City decades ago, and I was riding in the subway, and there was a young woman there, and she had a snake around her neck, just hanging around her neck. And nobody looked. This was nothing unusual. People were doing their things. This is just people do different things in the city, and nobody notices. People in the cities, to get an audience with them, to have them listen, it's very, very, very difficult. And they have so many other resources available to them. Why would they listen to a Seventh-day Adventist?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kraus. By the way, Dr. Park, welcome. Dr. Park,
thank you so much.
Joined us.
Sorry for my technical difficulties.
No problem. We are happy to see you with us. So we are discussing the challenges.
I'm very happy to see you, Dr. Park. I'm very happy to see you because you can now answer all the questions.
Well, I tend to take up all the time, Gary, so I thought I would get you a head start out of the gate. So thank you so much for covering for me. Thank you.
Yeah, so now I have a question, next question. So you mentioned some of the challenges that people face, missionaries face in urban centers. And we know that in urban area, people are more isolated. So they live a life when they sometimes do not know who lives next door to them. And it looks like, especially in Western context, they're very much satisfied with this style of life. So sometimes it's very difficult to reach them. So what can we do to face, to cope this challenge? What would you advise? And maybe you have some examples of how this challenge was overcome.
Okay, Dr. Park, for such a time as this, you have arrived.
Yes, let me get I got some slides here.
Oh yeah, you can share slides, please.
Thank you. Okay, very good.
Yeah, we can see them.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the meeting. I started my ministry 25 years in Los Angeles. I'm not from a big city. I'm from a very small dairy town in Northern California. But God called me to the big city, and it was quite a challenge. But I love Los Angeles and big cities because that's basically where the fish are. Jesus says, I will make you fishers of men. And if you want to go where the fish are, obviously they are in the big cities. So one of the questions you sent me, Felix, that you just asked was about social isolation and disconnection. So we know when people start out in rural areas, they tend to be very well connected socially. They have their families, they have their synagogue or their mosque, or their local church or African traditional religion. They have a very close-bound sociological interwoven fabric. But when they move to the city, usually because of education and work, this social fabric, especially from what they had growing up, is basically starts to disintegrate. And when that happens, I really believe the church should provide a new sociological, theological framework. And I know that when I left home, I was in my early 20s. I was away from my families, and this is when I myself was converted as a Seventh-day Adventist. So when young people or leave home because of education and work and move into the cities, there is an opportunity, I think, for the church to help them get reintegrated into a healthy social fabric. The problem is, of course, is that if within the church there is not this, that the social fabric has been frayed as well, then the church is losing a lot of opportunity for reestablishing the people within the social fabric.
Thank you very much. So in other words, a church can offer to people in big cities a kind of relationship that they are missing, that they used to have when they were in village or rural area, but now they lost it because they moved to another context.
Yeah, and I like Gary to make a comment on this as well. You know, we as Adventists tend to emphasize the truth, the vertical relationship with God, which I 100% agree on. And we think sometimes to focus more on that, but people in cities also need a very strong horizontal connection that I think Adventists haven't always taken advantage of. Well, what do you think about that, Gary?
I agree 100%. Community is very important. And as you say, when people move to the cities, they can easily become very dislocated. It's interesting, when you go to big cities, you'll find that there is a tendency for ethnic groups to stay together in enclaves. So you go to New York City, you'll find little Italy, you'll find little Korea, you'll find little India, because people want that community. They want to be able to be with people who eat the same food, talk the same language, laugh at the same jokes, whatever. But a lot of people get lost, and cities are places of dislocation. And if we as a church community cannot offer community to people, then we're going to miss the mark. And if we're only concentrating, as Dr. Park said, on conveying information, then we're shortchanging Christ's method of ministry, because you know how Ellen White summarizes
mingling. Yeah.
She talks about mingling, showing sympathy, ministering to needs, winning confidence. I mean, that's 80% of the process right there before we bid people to follow Jesus. But we as Adventists tend to launch onto that last bit because we love to preach the good news, and we should. But if it's just a matter of hitting people up here and not connecting them, then we are going to shortchange Christ's method of ministry. And when you look at the rate of apostasy in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, where for every 10 people that come in, at least 4 leave. And in Africa, it's not much better, if not worse, because we have a tendency to focus on getting people to sign on the dotted line, get baptized, and that's it. And they haven't had that connection. They're not connected with the body. And so community is so important, but often we're not good at it.
Okay, I have one more question related to what you said. Do we have any difference, or have you noticed any difference between big cities in different parts of the world? So this isolation that we were speaking about is, I believe, it is more characteristic of the Western society. But what about Asia, Africa, some other places? Because in those places, as far as I know, people value community more than in the Western world. Yes, please, Dr. Park. Oh, you have answer already.
Yeah, I had a slide here because it was part of your question. You know, I like to tell people the #1 export of Western culture is its individualism, which is greatly multiplied in an urban environment. And I tell people, even in Africa and Asia, individualism, especially people who have any education, as Gary mentioned, and as you just mentioned, people who have education are going to drink the waters of individualism. And even though community is a greater part in Asia and Africa, in the city breeds an individualistic point of view. You tend to have your own apartment, your own car, your own public transportation, your own phone. And so the fabrics, the fabric that was in the village that occurred naturally tends to be disrupted in the city, no matter where you are, and therefore, wherever the church is, must make a conscious attempt to reestablish that community that they may or may not have experienced back in their home place.
Okay, thank you very much. But just imagine this situation. I am a person that is living in the big city, and I grew up in the rural area, but I moved to the big city because it has more opportunities for job and everything else, or other advantages. And I still, as you said, I'm homesick for this good relationship with others. Yes, but in order to survive, I work day and night, and I simply do not have time even to go to the church, or even if I meet some missionaries or some Christians, I simply don't have time to spend with them, to be converted. So how can we overcome these obstacles or this challenge?
You know, what Jim was saying about the tendency toward individualism in the city, there's also a tendency towards secularism as people come to the cities as well. And so, you know, you can be a good Adventist, for example, growing up in the village, you go to university in the city, and suddenly the only community that you have is your fellow students. So they go off to the bar of an evening and whatnot, and suddenly you are dislocated from your home community, and now you're trying to navigate the new pathway. What you're saying about people being busy, working night and day, that's true. However, most people still take time for meals, and most people take time to watch sport or get involved in sport or some sort of activity. There are some people who just work night and day, but that's not everyone. And so we need Seventh-day Adventists in those communities who will connect with these people, not inviting them to an evangelistic series. They don't have time, but take time to have a meal with these people. They're eating anyway, so make friends with people, have a meal with them. These people play every Tuesday evening. They play soccer, join the soccer team. We need Adventists who will get outside of the pew. Let's get away from this idea that our goal is to invite people to the church. Forget about that in the cities. Our job is to leave the church and connect where people are, because we cannot expect them to come to us. So we need church members in their workplace, builders, nurses, laborers, teachers. They need to connect with the people in their sphere of influence. Students, you connect with fellow students and you join them in what they are already doing. You're not asking them to invest time that they don't have in something you're doing. You connect as much as possible where it doesn't compromise your standards with what they're doing. And then, then you offer alternative activities, and you let the students in your class know that we've got a group of students who are doing such and such. So you involve them in activities with other Christians. And that then provides a bonding fabric for community.
So we don't need to wait for people to come to us. We need to find people where they are.
Definitely.
Yeah, excellent points, Gary. And I appreciate this question about people being busy in the city. You know, Matthew 28, traditionally, we've started understanding it from the word go, but actually that word can be translated as you go, make disciples, as you go to the store, as you go to your work, as you go to your gym, as Gary alluded to, as you mingle with people. Every day there's opportunity for discipleship and witness. Evangelism is more than just a special program, either after church or year after year. Let me show you a slide here that I think is extremely interesting, especially in the city. I think the church has to take advantage of where people are. And where are people in the city? Well, they're always on their cell phone. And so certainly I'm not an expert on my cell phone because I'm past that generation, but I got this slide about an older woman, I believe in Eastern Europe, came across the TikTok app, a social media network platform that uses short form videos. She was moved to start a Bible study ministry. As you know, TikTok is very, very short, maybe 15, 30 seconds. In just 2 years, she has amassed more than 29,700 followers. Her daily messages follow a do not fear theme and include Faith of Jesus Bible course. So I really think that if I were to reemerge in the city, I would certainly start using social media on a daily basis to connect with people, because that's where people are connecting nowadays, not only face to face.
And let me
Yes,
add
please.
to what Jim said. Let me add to what Jim said, that we have been given unprecedented opportunities with digital media today, but there is a danger. And the danger is that we go back to the old model that our mission role is to spread information. So we need to make sure that these are seen as tools, not replacement for personal ministry. So we need to find ways to connect people virtually into real life physical community. Now, let me give you an example. Pastor Raylord raises a young pastor in Manila. I think Jim probably knows him. And so some time ago, he utilized a program called meetup.com. And meetup.com has like millions of people on it. And basically is you can start up a group. It can be a running group. It can be a sewing group. It can be a reading group. And you just put on there, we're going to be meeting in such and such a place at such a time. And you come there and meet with us for this activity. So it's a way of connecting with people in the community. And I remember one of their slogans early on was, Meetup exists on the internet to get people off the internet. So Raylord took this tool and said, well, why don't we use it? And so they started up small groups for young adults all over the city of Manila, where they would come together, talk together, and the conversation would invariably include spiritual things. And I can remember once I sent him a message, and I knew it was like 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning in Manila, and I was expecting that perhaps I'd get a response from him sometime in the next few days. But he immediately texted back. I said, what are you doing awake? And he said, I'm in one of these, I think they call it Life Hope Group or something like that, in a cafe here in Manila. I said, why are you meeting at this time of night? And he said, well, for this group of young professionals, it was the best time in their schedule. Busy people, this worked best for them. It wouldn't work for me. I go to bed at 9 o'clock. So for them, it worked for them. So here's an example of utilizing what Jim talked about, is that we use technology to support, but never replace physical community.
Thank you.
Amen.
There is one
Excellent.
question from our attendees, and the question is, in our church in big cities, is our church in big cities adapting quickly enough to technological and secular changes in society? Is our church in big cities adapting quickly enough to technological and secular changes in society?
Well, the short answer is no. I mean, the cities are growing so rapidly, it's just hard to keep up. And the societal changes that are, I mean, who could have envisaged COVID hitting the world? I mean, and how that impacted the cities? Nobody predicted that, and so nobody was prepared for that. But what we needed, and what we saw in many cases, were churches that were very nimble, were very quick to adapt to the new circumstances, and they were able to leverage that, particularly places that had some sort of technology in place, and also places that had small group ministries already in place, because through that pandemic, those small groups, even though sometimes they were not able to connect physically, they still kept in contact with each other. So technological changes, I mean, artificial intelligence, chat box. I mean, this chatbot just hit us like a ton of bricks a few months ago. I wasn't thinking about that. That wasn't on my radar for how that could impact missions. So, but the Seventh-day Adventist Church has actually been very, very ahead of the curve in terms of adapting to new media. I mean, I was just thinking this morning about back in, I don't know, the 1950s and whatnot. You had Faith for Today on television. You had the radio program, the first coast-to-coast program on radio, religious program in the United States was a Seventh-day Adventist program. And so we see that we adapt and we utilize it, but we need to be open to the Holy Spirit's leading to, as new things come up, that we find ways to use it without bowing down to the new idol and saying this is now our new methodology, but seeing how it can be used within the framework of Christ's method of ministry.
Thank you very much. One more question from our attendees, from participants. How do we navigate the clash of cultures and beliefs in multicultural big cities while trying to spread the Bible message?
Well, the reason why I love Los Angeles, in Los Angeles is a little different than some urban centers because the ethnic groups and cultural groups, they're spread throughout the city. Yes, we have a very small Chinatown and Japanese town downtown, but basically in my daily intercourse with people, you might meet someone from Spain, from Africa, from Vietnam, from China, etc. And so this is what makes the city, for me, so interesting, is that instead of me having as a missionary to go all over the world to meet people, now the world has come to Southern California. And I think it makes it a much more exciting place. For instance, most people don't know that here in Southern California, almost all the donut shops are owned by Cambodians. Very early on, a Cambodian immigrant started a donut shop, and then when the families came, they started other donut shops. So if you go into a donut shop in Southern California, and there's an Asian behind the counter, 99% of the time, they are Cambodian. And so I went into our local donut shop one time. I think this is so much fun. And I said to the very nice lady there, how do you say one in Cambodian? She said moi. And so that's the only Cambodian word that I know. And so whenever I go into that donut shop, very infrequently, I'll point to a donut and say moi. And so to me, having the ethnic cultural groups come into a city and into an area, it's very exciting. There's new languages, new food, new opportunities. There are new stories of where people came from, their story. And I think there's a lot of, obviously, opportunities for the gospel to get connected with people from all over the world. People are much easier to win away from their homeland in a new place than they were back in their original cultural context. So people are being won to the gospel in the diverse urban environment.
Okay, but in this case, do you see, as far as I know, all those people try to live in a community, Cambodian community, Korean community, Chinese community, and sometimes it's very difficult to take them out of this community. And to
actually in Southern California, people live, there are no identifiable communities. People live as a mosaic all across the city. And so they tend, if you go door to door, which I have done, here's someone from African America, here's a Spanish person, here's an Asian person. So this is the result of a clear mixture of cultures here in Southern California in particular.
The bonds, although in places they may not still be physically connected, they may not be living next door to each other, although in some other cities they are, there's still the the bonds that hold them together, the cultural bonds. And so my suggestion is don't take them out of that cultural context. Let's start groups of believers among Cambodians. Let's start groups of believers among the people coming from the Southern Asian continent. Let's start groups among the Nigerians, etc. Don't expect them to, first of all, come to us. Again, we go to them. I notice where I live here in Maryland, every Sunday driving, or even on Sabbath driving to church, we will go past fields where there are teams of cricketers playing. Now, this is the land of baseball, not of cricket, but here they are, dozens of Southern Asia young men playing cricket. So they've come from the Southern Asia context. And on Sunday, they drive in from wherever, and their common bond is this cultural link of the game of cricket. And I was just saying to Bettina, my wife, the other day, you know, if I had the time and I wasn't traveling all the time, I would go and join the cricket team, not because I'm Southern Asian, but because I come from Australia. I enjoy playing cricket. And what a way to put Christ's method of ministry into practice, to be able to mingle with these guys and get to know them. No better way. So we need Seventh-day Adventists in the cities who is prepared, who are willing to enter the cultural streams that have come into the city. Again, not expecting them to come to our, first off, to come to our Sabbath morning church service that has a very distinctive culture and a distinctive flavor. I mean, the average Cambodian walking into a Seventh-day Adventist church would think they've walked into a different planet. I mean, the music is so foreign, the people are dressed differently, etc. So you'll remember at the council at Jerusalem, there were many speeches given, but my favorite speech is the one that was given by the Apostle James right at the end of that speech, of that conference, where he says, "It is my conviction, brothers, that we should not make it difficult for the Gentiles who are turning to Jesus." We should not make it difficult. But, you know, sometimes in our churches, we put up so many hoops and walls and barriers, and you have to do this and you have to do that. And we shouldn't make it difficult. So if there's any cultural practice that we are engaged in that is purely tradition or personal taste, and it's a barrier to people, get rid of it. Let's get it out of the way. Let's clear it, because we want to make it as easy as possible for people to come to know Jesus.
Thank you very much. One more question. And this is a question from Gideon Peterson, and he is asking, mapping our SDA congregations, the majority of our congregations are in the urban centers. Our small rural churches are dying because of urban migration. How do we balance building our rural churches while supporting the urban sprawling churches? So our congregations in rural areas, it's true, they are dying, and very, very, very soon maybe we will become an urban church.
You know, it's interesting. I have a friend, Nongbi, who's up at the upper hill country, Chin country in Myanmar. He runs a high school there, and he says, you know, Pastor Park, we have no college-age young people, because as soon as people graduate from high school, they go down to Yangon or some other city. And so this exodus of young people because of education and work, especially in, I would say, 2/3 world countries, like you do have in Africa, is pronounced. And how to balance the emerging needs of the city and taking care of the rural churches is, I think, something that we really haven't addressed as a church as far as resources, pastoral and financial resources are concerned. Gary, what's your experience in this particular area?
Yeah, you know, and greetings, Gideon, and thanks for the question. You know, I'm not sure exactly where you're sourcing your data from, and it varies from region of the world to region of the world, but I'd like to suggest that we're still a rural church. Here in North America, the average size of a church is fewer than 50 people. And so we are spread out around rural areas. And yeah, sure, with the flight to the cities, sure, the churches are struggling, but of course their communities are shrinking as well, because it's not just the church members who are going to the cities, it's the people from the community as well. So as I said a little earlier, it's not just the cities, it's not either or. We still need to be doing both. But historically and currently, we have put more resources into rural areas than we have into the cities. And we still focus most of our outreach and mission efforts into rural areas rather than cities. And so all I'm suggesting is that because more than 50% of the world population now lives in the cities, we need to have a reorientation of our mission resources to try to reach more people in the cities. Now, the question of how do you deal with failing rural churches is another discussion for another conference, because that raises all sorts of issues. I mean, today, here in North America, I would prefer to, if I had the money, to raise my daughter in New York City rather than in one of the rural areas, because you look at the small country towns there, they have problems with meth and drug addiction, they have teenage pregnancy, they have high unemployment rates, not a great place. So the struggling, all I would say is the same method that we use in the cities is the same method we should use in rural areas. We need to be mingling with people in rural areas. We need to be showing sympathy. We need to be ministering needs. We need to be winning confidence. But so many of our churches are just Sabbath morning clubs. People come in Sabbath morning, they worship together, then we have lunch together, then that's it. And part of the challenge too in the cities, similarly, is many of our churches are what I call commuter churches. So we have the church, but most of the members catch a bus, a train, or drive in, and nobody lives in the actual community where the church is. So the only thing that the neighbors know is that on Saturday mornings, there's less parking available. There's no actually connection with the community because people commute in Sabbath morning and then they leave late Sabbath afternoon, and that's it.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. So we have one more answer, one more question, excuse me. How can evangelists address the skepticism and atheism prevalent among the highly educated population of big cities? So how can we address the problem of atheism and secularism, skepticism, that are commonly we can see among people with the highly educated people?
Pastor Felix, just before Jim and I answer that, I just want to remind people who are participating in this program that Global Mission operates 6 global mission centers for helping us more effectively reach out to different people groups. And 2 of those centers are related to our conversation today. Well, all of them are peripherally, but centrally, we have a center for urban mission, the Global Mission Urban Mission Center, and that's headed up by Pastor Bledy Leno, and he's working on resources and models and ministry approaches that can be of help. So you can always turn to him for any counsel or consultation. We also have a center for secular and post-Christian mission, which is what we're talking about right now. How do we reach atheists, agnostics, people who are no longer affiliated with any Christian group, the post-Christian populations? And there's no easy answer, but I'm going to bore you. I'm going to maybe frustrate some of you by saying we don't have any better way than Christ's method of ministry. I don't care if it's an atheist or a Pentecostal believer or whoever it is, or a Muslim or a Hindu or whatever. Christ's method of ministry cuts across cultures. And before we can start arguing philosophy with an atheist, it's best to make that person our friend. Because once they're a friend and they trust us, they're going to be much more interested in listening to what we have to say. And I would like to suggest that most post-Christians today aren't really interested in what you believe. They couldn't care less. I mean, if they want to know about different belief systems, they'll go to Google and they'll look at it and they can find out about 100 different belief systems. They'll only be interested in what you have to say when they trust you. And so they are interested in, does it work? What difference does it make in your life? So here's somebody in my community, and they're the most loving, fun to be around, positive person. I want to know what makes them tick, what motivates them. Then they're going to be interested in what you might have to say about whether there's a God or not. But if you come into the community holding a public lecture on, here's 25 reasons why you should believe in God, you're going to have a hard struggle in the cities, because they'll come up with 25 reasons why you shouldn't believe in God, and they'll have 25 academic papers to support it.
Thank you very much. One more question from Samuel Lumba, and he's asking, how do you see the UCIs as context of conversion for people living in big cities? Is there any successful case study you can share with us? So as I understand, UCI is Urban Centers Initiative or something like that, yes?
Urban Centers of Influence, yeah.
Or
I'm speaking too much here, Jim. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. I feel I'm blessed. I think we're obviously running on the same issue here. As far as secular people are concerned, I think a really great story in the Old Testament is the story of Naaman. And basically, receptivity is very important, whether a person is poor or wealthy. And here you have Naaman, who's the captain of the king's guard, a very influential, very great man. And it wasn't until he gets leprosy that then he begins seeking for deeper spiritual answers. And so when the life goes down, the prayers go up. And so I really agree with Gary that we have to mingle with people. And as we mingle with people, LOI has a famous story, a dream about going picking berries. And she says, not all the berries are ripe at the same time. So when we develop these relationships, we have to watch when people are ripe for a gospel presentation. And that usually happens when there's either a micro or a personal crisis. The pandemic, for instance, in 2019 was a macro crisis. And now everyone is receptive because of this macro crisis. So when we do form friends, we should watch for opportunities, especially when their lives go down. They are more receptive then to the gospel message. And so the mingling also should be combined with a watching for opportunities that when people come into crisis, like Naaman, who are very great people in their society, they will start searching, and then we as their friends and Adventists can start to begin to answer their questions.
Thank you for your comment. And I have just one more question about that. So you mentioned this dream of Ellen G. White about the berries, yes? And how do we know which berry is ripe and which berry is not ripe? So for example, we meet people, yes, so how can we discern who is ready? And you mentioned crisis. And it's true that crisis, personal or micro crisis, as you said, is one of the condition or trigger why people can convert it. But do you see what can we do for people who do not have like a visible crisis? So for example, they have good job, they have good family, so they're satisfied with their lives, and it looks like they don't need anything. So shall we preach to them or not? Maybe we just leave them and say, okay, this berry is not ripe yet, so let us look for another one.
Gary?
So what would you say?
We certainly shouldn't preach to them, that's for sure, because they're not going to be interested in us preaching to them. And of course, we see this particularly where you come from, Felix. You know, when we look at Europe, where people are rich and increased with goods and they feel as if they have nothing. But let me suggest that everybody has needs. Some needs are very visible. We go to a poorer community and we see people who are hungry, when that's in our face. But the people who have a big house, fancy car, big bank account, they still have challenges. And we part of what we need to connect with those areas of need. And so you may be very wealthy, but at midnight you're still tossing and turning in your bed because you're worried about your teenage daughter who's out clubbing. You could be a very wealthy person in a very nice house, but you're lonely. Because these things do not make us immune from needs, but they're going to be more subtle, more hidden needs. But sure enough, people are still going to have needs. And before you go, I don't want my good friend and colleague, Pastor Samuel Lumway, to feel cheated here, but I don't think we answered him properly. Samuel Lumway, of course, is from our Global Center for Adventist Muslim Relations. Yes, I could give you example. Let me just give you one example of a country. I'm not going to name it because it's a sensitive country. They started hundreds of small storefront centers of influence, mainly selling health food. And as a result of that, they have had literally hundreds of baptisms because they've gone embedded into the community, connecting with people who would never come to a church. And every urban center that we help fund from our office, one of the criteria is it has to have a plan in place to, one, put Christ's method of ministry into practice, which includes bidding people to follow Jesus. And secondly, a goal to start a new group of believers. Sorry, I just had to get that in, Felix.
Excellent.
Yeah, so now I have just maybe one more question. And if you have something else from our participants, I'm still waiting for questions. But I believe you already answered, partially you already answered to this question earlier, but let me formulate this question again. So this question actually is very simple. What strategies can be employed to enhance the mission in the big cities? So you already said that traditional way how we usually do it, like evangelistic campaign, most probably they will not work out in the big cities because people simply do not have time to go to this campaign. You already said that we need to mingle with the people, but maybe you can just generalize or just put it in the better way. So what shall we do? What kind of a strategy we can use to reach people in the big cities?
You know, I don't want to be misrepresented or misunderstood that I'm opposing public evangelism in the cities. And I think that there are some cities where you can still do it and there will be some people who will come. But you tend to attract a certain demographic who will come. And often they tend to be people who come from some sort of a Christian background. So it's not going to be necessarily as effective as for reaching people from a non-Christian background and from people who are busy. That's the thing.
Excuse me for interrupting you. Yeah, excuse me for interrupting you. My background is Eastern Europe, and I remember that we conducted programs. Usually, people who attended the programs were people who are retired, so they have a lot of time to come, and we almost do not have people of middle age and young people. So this is what you said, that we attract only a certain particular group of people, not everyone. Yeah, please continue. Sorry for interrupting you.
So in answer to the question, a good point, the answer to the question of how we can approach cities could take different angles. I mean, I've talked about Christ's method of ministry. Another thing for us to think about is Jeremiah chapter 29, where God, where a letter is sent to the exiles in Babylon. And in that letter, there is the only place in the Bible where I see specific instruction given on how to conduct urban mission. And basically, God says to the exiles, don't expect to go back to Jerusalem anytime soon. You're going to marry, you're going to plant gardens, get ready to stay here for at least another 70 years. And while you are here, don't keep yourself in some sort of a separate Jewish enclave. You become part of the community, and the wording actually goes you are to work for and pray for the shalom of the city. And shalom is one of those Hebrew words. It's so beautiful you want to hug it because it means so many different things. It means peace, prosperity, well-being, etc., etc. So he is saying, stay in the city and bless the city. And so I think that's a nice little metaphor for us to think about in our ministry. Are we blessing the city? So streets in Nairobi should be safer because there are Seventh-day Adventists working for and praying for the shalom of the city. City parks in Nairobi should be cleaner because there are Adventists praying for and working for the shalom. Families should be flourishing. People should be healthier because there are Seventh-day Adventists who are praying and working for the shalom of the city.
Amen.
So
Yes.
Yeah, please continue.
Go ahead, Felix. Yes, please.
So what I want to say, we need to offer something to the big cities, to the people in the big cities. We need to be like a salt that makes it, or something that makes the city better place. And we need to offer something to the people who live city to help them to cope with their personal crises that they're coming through. Yes.
Yes, I have a slide on this particular
yes, please share.
question. Thank you so much. So let me strategies for reaching the city. Let me just say that I'm coming out with a book, Mission to the City, sponsored by the General Conference Urban Mission Department. It should be out in a couple months. And in that book, I have 17 case studies from around the world, people interacting with the city in a positive way. And so if you email me, I will get in contact with you. There are some case studies from Africa that are very fascinating, as well as from Asia, North America. And so you're welcome to email me about that. Let me tell my own personal experience, and I appreciate what Gary said about evangelistic meetings. I think evangelistic meetings can be used as a reaping mechanism for already contacted people. And in 2018, I started a food bank here in Southern California at a small local church. We only had about, well, this is before the pandemic, about maybe 100 people attending, 80 people attending. I started a food bank, and the main reason I started a food bank was I saw that I could meet the people every week. And because with evangelism, or let's say even a health programming, maybe it's only for 2 or 3 weeks and then they're gone. But with the food bank, I saw that here I could meet the people every single week. And then I'd have more of a chance, as Gary has emphasized, mingling with them. Well, we had a small food bank. We were serving about 100, 125 families a week, which is still pretty significant. When the pandemic hit, there was much greater need for food, of course. And in the middle of the pandemic, we were actually serving 1,000 families a week, not only our church, but we had 2 other Adventist churches involved. So what I think is key in the urban environment is that anything you can do, whether it's a hygienic restaurant or something, to have a continual contact with the fish, so to speak, you will have a more opportunity. And so this food bank was really very productive in this discipleship results. And one of the things that I didn't see was most of our food bank was helped by non-Adventists would come and volunteer. And so when you do have some type of a community outreach, people like Gary already alluded to, retired people, well-to-do people, people who want to help their community. they came and volunteered with us. And so I think any model that we can have that has an ongoing relationship with people in the urban centers will be more productive for long-term discipleship and evangelistic opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to ask one more question. Just imagine that I am a pastor in a big city. What advice would you give me how to organize the missionary work, how to attract people to the church? So I am a pastor, let us say in Los Angeles. Dr. Park, so this is your area.
Dr. Park, well, you know, I do have a Korean last name. I also have a slide for this. Let me, so I really think that we as Adventists need to be countercultural. I think our whole church is called to be countercultural. And let me just bring up about in the Korean church, in the Korean culture, that was called poly, which is quick. And everything in Seoul, South Korea, or in Korea culture is quick. And what I saw in Korea, for instance, is that the Adventist church itself was engaged in poly culture. You know, the poor pastor was worked from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. Everything was quick. And what I would say to my Korean pastors when I taught them in Asia was this: why don't we as urban pastors be countercultural? People in Korea are totally burnt out. Why don't we, instead of being quick, why don't we offer a sanctuary of peace, a sanctuary of rest, of Sabbath rest in a city filled with overstressed people? Why don't we offer a place of rest instead of being caught up in the quick? Why don't we offer something that the people need in the urban context, which is rest, which is peace? And so my advice to urban pastors is swim against the grain. The fish are swimming in a direction, and because they're swimming in one direction, if we swim in the other direction, I think we will meet needs that the fish need, and perhaps then be able to be very attractive in what we're saying and doing as a countercultural influence. Gary.
I'd like to suggest another thing that pastors could consider is the concept of urban centers of influence. An urban center of influence is a platform in the community where you can connect with people. So you're not inviting them to your church building necessarily, but you can have a space somewhere. It can be a community center, it can be a park, it could be a rented facility where you actually offer some sort of a service. It could be a juice bar. It could be a place where people come to learn English as a second language. It depends on what the needs are in the community, but it's a neutral space. It's a third space between home and work where people can go. And it can be a place where you make friendships with people in the community. I think, for example, in Chicago, a young pastor, their church planted another church out in the suburbs, and it was in a shopping mall. And in the shopping mall, there's a store. They turned it into an art space where people can come, kids, families, they can paint, they can draw, they can sculpture with clay, they can do all sorts of wonderful things. And hundreds of people come there, and the Adventist volunteers working there soon make friends with people. And directly behind that, they actually have their worship space. So it's a very literally 2 or 3 steps from the center of influence into their worship space. But to have some sort of a neutral territory where you are connecting with the community, putting Christ's method of ministry into practice, it provides a springboard for ministry, just like the food bank that Jim was talking to, that we're actually getting out of the pews, we're going to where the people are and making those connections that are so important.
Thank you. One more question, just a follow-up question. I'm a city pastor. I established this center of influence. For example, I distribute food, as Dr. Jim Park is doing, and I have contacts with many people, and I mingle with them, but they do not come to the church. So we are good friends. So shall we worry about that we can have like many contacts, but people are not coming to the church? They are still in their place. So maybe they don't have like big crisis, or I don't know what else, but something is missing to convert them to be Christians.
Well, you know, Adventists are very good at attracting the fish. And what I say that are, you know, like our food bank or a Revelation seminar, whatever it happens to be, all that does is get the fish around the boat. And that's very valuable because we can't catch the fish until the fish are around the boat. And then we have to make a connection with the fish. And I think this is where is the main fault I see as I go around the world. I don't know what Gary thinks, is that here you have fish around the boat. Like, for instance, I was in Vietnam and they were holding a weekly lunch for the community. And so I went over there to see what was happening in Ho Chi Minh City. And as I expected, all the Adventists were serving the food. The people were eating at the tables, but there was no Adventists there talking to the people who they had attracted. And so I think a really key strategy in all of this, as I tell people, the most important part of a meeting is meeting the people. It isn't the food we're serving. All the food does is get them near the boat. Now here are the fish. What are we doing to, as Gary alluded, mingle? And mingle means more than just having a program. It is developing the skills as a fisherman to get connected with the fish and bring them into the boat.
Thank you very much. So maybe you can just finally say something. What is the future for the mission in the big cities? How do you see it?
Well, I think it's all about connection. I think it's all about making connection with people in the community. And that's not going to happen with just holding events. It's going to take people who are willing to commit themselves to live in the city incarnationally like Jesus, to make those connections, to make those friendships, to minister to needs. Even if people decide they're never going to accept Jesus or become Seventh-day Adventists, we still need to be loving the community. And wouldn't it be wonderful if people in the cities knew that Seventh-day Adventists, they're the people who love us. They're the people who care for us. They're the people who have compassion. I think that would make a big difference to our urban mission.
Thank you. Dr. Park, maybe you can just add something.
Yes, I would really like to dovetail on what Gary just said, loving people. You know, Ellen White says, if we would humble ourselves before God and be kind and courteous and tenderhearted and pitiful, there would be 100 conversions to the truth, where now there's only one. And I think becoming loving Christians in an unloving city is the key to winning people for Jesus and having them join us to proclaim the second coming.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank our experts, Dr. Gary Kraus and Dr. Jim Park, for being with us and answering our questions. And we really hope that we have our big mission for the big cities, and we hope that we will be able to accomplish it with the help of the Holy Spirit. Thank you very much. Now, I just want to make some announcements. Yes, I want to make some announcements, and first announcement is that we will have a Vesper service today at 6:30 East African time, and this Vesper service will be streamed through our platform. So I would like to invite all of you to join us. And tomorrow, Divine Worship and Sabbath School will be also streamed through the platform, so you can be part, or you can worship with us in the context of this conference. Also, I would like to emphasize that tomorrow, after the Divine Worship at 3 p.m., we will have a panel discussion with the faculty of AUA, of the Theological Seminary of AUA. And my final announcement is that all the participants of the conference is supposed to get, all the participants are supposed to receive a questionnaire to evaluate this conference. So we would like to know your feedback, what you like, what you didn't like, what we can improve next time. Thank you very much for being with us. And Dr. Park, may I ask you to pray in the end of this session?
Thank you so much, Father in heaven. You said in the book of Jonah, should not I be concerned for this great city? We know your heart is reaching out to the great city. You sent Jonah to convert the whole city single-handedly. And we pray, Lord, that just as you sent Jonah, that you may prepare us in whatever whale we need to go through, that we may go into the cities with hearts aflame for you. Thank you for AUA and leading out in this conference about conversion and urban ministry. Thank you for Gary and his office of mission there at the General Conference. We pray, Lord, that you may bring us together to unite in urban mission so that one day we may be taken to the great city above, the New Jerusalem, and be with you forever and ever, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for being with us again. And now we will have a break. And at 6:30, I want to invite you for the next meeting.